Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you to the Power of Our Story. We are a place, the Power of Our Story is a place where we have platforms of safety, of protection, of camaraderie for our first responders who are suffering in silence. And today we have a really interesting twist. We have Hannah Overton on, somebody I have been following and writing and praying for years because of wrongdoing in our justice system. And she has a powerful story, an incredible story of faith. She's my hero in the faith. So it is an honor. I'm going to go ahead and read her story, and then I'm going to hand it over to Hannah to share. So the Overton Story. In 2006, Larry and Hannah Overton fell in love with a little boy at their church. His name was Andrew. Andrew was a foster child that the Overtons felt a great desire to provide a home for and to become his forever family. He would be their sixth child, an addition to their 5 biological children. A few months later, tragedy struck and their world was turned upside down. Andrew went home to be with Jesus when he passed away from a rare medical condition called hypernatremia. This condition caused very high fatal levels of sodium in his body. This sorrowful tragedy was compounded when Larry and Hannah were accused and charged in Andrew's death. On September 7th, 2007, Hannah was convicted of capital murder and sent to a maximum security prison for life without the possibility of parole for a crime she didn't commit. This would leave Larry at home to care for their other 5 children. During Hannah's time in prison, God not only held her and her family in his hands, but also used this trial in mighty ways. After 7 years of imprisonment, Hannah was exonerated and all charges were dropped on April 8th, 2015. On May 10th, 2017, Hannah was declared actually innocent. During this span, many have come to the Lord and the ministry is continually growing. Although Hannah is home with her family, Hebrews 13:3 reminds her to remember those in prison as if you were there with them. The Overton's heart is to share their story, encourage those facing times of sorrow, and is always trust that God is faithful to lead them every step of the way. They will continue to minister to those behind the gates and remind the church that this charge is not only for those who have been there, like Hannah, but for all believers. You guys, it is such an honor to have Hannah on. I just want you to know, as you know, I lost my dad to suicide in 2003. And you know what trauma does, you start feeling not safe in the world, your world changes, you're a little hypervigilant. So in around 2007, before Hannah was indicted, she was on 20/20. And I remember being in bed, again, this is like totally divine orchestration, knowing I perfectly well should not turn on that TV. And I just felt like, again, it was nighttime when the trauma kind of comes up and you start feeling all the anxiety of it. I wanted to diffuse. And so I turned on the TV and I saw 20/20 and Hannah Overton was the story. Okay, this was 2007. I was glued to the story for 2 years and I was horrified because I saw so many holes in the investigation. As a mother of 4, I know exactly how things could go wrong. And at the end of this, I never do this, but I got out of bed, 11 o'clock at night, went down, got on the computer, and I ranted on 20/20. I said, this is wrong. This is terrible. Look at what you are doing to this family. And I could see it. I saw the ambition in the prosecutor and the ambition in the investigator. You could see them trying so hard to find anything that was wrong. It was shallow. And so I just remember just being horrified. And so I did all I knew what to do. Life got very busy. And then later I happened to be, gosh, this was like probably 5 or 7 years later, somebody I went to high school with happened to be the videographer of her case. We just connected, and I started seeing him post about all the things that are happening with Hannah, the steps forward. And I'll tell you something, our house church, I said, please connect me with her. I had a stack of letters that you and I wrote, Hannah, back and forth. And our house church prayed for you every week together for like 3 years. So, okay, I'm telling you, I need these. So to know that the day that finally this amazing Cynthia Orr attorney, pro bono, had a backbone, she cared. She took on this case, and it turns out there was all kinds of bad stuff happening, suppression of evidence that landed Hannah in prison. Her husband drove 7 hours each way, 15 hours a weekend, so that she would not lose hope. See, I'm telling your story. I know your story so well, Hannah. So all these years later, this is the first time that I actually get to see my friend. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to you, Hannah, to share how did you do this? You turned that prison upside down. How did you do this? So Hannah Overton, I hand it over to you. Welcome.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here too. I would not be here if it weren't for people like you that prayed continuously and wrote letters that were encouraging. And, there were definitely days when I needed something encouraging, and just a letter in the mail from somebody I didn't know was what did that for me, what gave me the encouragement to move on. It's only by the grace of God. You asked how I did it. That's the only way. People say that I'm strong. I am not strong. On my own, I would be in a psych center. There's no way that I would be able to be where I am today if it weren't for, God carrying me through this and the people praying for me. As far as turning, you said I turned the prison upside down. I don't know that I turned the prison upside down, but I do know that God is continuing to do really awesome things through this. God had a purpose for what he allowed. And, there was a time when I was in there that when I first got there, it was real easy for me to see everybody's charges and see everybody's behavior and be just completely overwhelmed. I had grown up very sheltered in a Christian home, actually like on a missionary base. Stupid was a bad word growing up, and I'd never seen an adult hit another adult. And then all of a sudden I'm in a maximum security prison. So I had, just was complete culture shock. But what happened is that God just began to show me that I had a hope that these people didn't have. Even though I was facing a life without the possibility of parole, I had a hope that people didn't have. And he also began to show me that their behaviors and their charges and all of those things, that wasn't like they didn't wake up one day and decide to commit a crime. That things happened that took them to that place. There was a lot of hurt and a lot of pain that got them to where they are. And that God saw that pain and his heart was breaking for them. And he was, he was hurting, and his love for them was so much more than I could even imagine. And, the things that I was seeing that I was allowing to disgust me, like their behavior or whatever, that's not what he was seeing when he looked at them, that he was seeing the pain that they were in, and that he wanted to bring hope. And so I began to do a Bible study with a couple of ladies in there that it was called Healed and Set Free. And it was just a real small Bible study. And that as their lives began to change, more people began to join the Bible study. And what started out with 2 people, then next was 3 people, and then 4 people. And in the Texas prisons, you're not allowed to meet with more than 4 people at a time. So if you get together, more than 4 people at a time get together to do something, it can be considered inciting a riot. So you can get a case for, a disciplinary case for inciting a riot, even if you're doing Bible study. And so we had to have different groups. And so then I went from doing, 1 Bible study to doing 2 Bible studies. And before I knew it, I was doing one every week, the same study with different people every night. And then as it continued to grow, I began to do them with people at night, and then they would do them with a different group in the afternoon, or vice versa. And it just continued to grow. By the time I left, there were a little over 100 people that were doing the Bible studies that my church was sending in, and getting together at least on a weekly basis and doing these studies and growing. And I was just seeing, God change lives. And I wanted, when I came home, we continued that. And it's really neat because God's given us this platform for that to just continue to grow. And now we do these outreaches twice a year where we send in hygiene products and cooling products. In Texas, we don't have air conditionings in our prisons, and it's like 120 degrees. People die from the heat. And so we actually give water bottles, and we give cooling towels and things to help with that process. And so along with that, we invite them to be a part of the Bible study. And the Bible study now has gotten to where there's over 1,200 people that are involved in it. So we send them in like 3 times a year, and we have everybody that's involved with Bible study now has a pen pal that writes to them. Well, not now, that's our goal. But every time we just got like 200 new people involved in the last couple months, and we don't have pen pals for them yet. So our goal is to get Christian pen pals for everybody that is involved in the Bible study. We also send them cards and letters every holiday and for their birthdays, so they know that they're loved and they're not forgotten. That started because a friend of mine that had been my friend throughout this from before, she wanted to send the ladies I was doing Bible study with a Christmas card. Went back when there were 6 ladies, and I watched these ladies get this card from somebody they didn't know and cry because they got mail. And, their mother hadn't sent them a Christmas card. Nobody, they hadn't gotten any mail. And then not only did they cry that day because they got mail, but they kept that card on their table till like April as proof that somebody cared enough to send them a Christmas card. And when I told her that, my friend, she was so heartbroken by that she said, I'm going to do this every holiday for everybody that's involved in the Bible study. And she continued doing that up until we got to 500 people involved in the Bible study. And at that point, she's still involved, but at that point she cried as she admitted that she needed help because she couldn't keep up with all of them. She didn't want to give it up because it was such a big part of her heart, and she wanted to make sure it was done perfectly. And so it's really neat to see how God grew her heart for that ministry, which is she's taken on as her ministry to do. But we've God just continues to do like miraculous things inside that prison and change lives. And it's so cool when I hear stories about, like, there's this one lady, I don't know if I have time to tell the whole story. I'll try to be short, but she her girlfriend got saved and started coming to the Bible study. And she was angry because her girlfriend was coming to the Bible study, and she thought that I was going to tell her girlfriend that she had to break up with her, which was between her and Jesus. And I was, I'm sure God would have taken care of that, but I wasn't planning on telling her that. But she was upset because she thought I was going to. And so she had planned to try to kill me. She actually had this plan. She was going to kill me because that would fix the problem. And she was in there for murder and had committed 2 murders since she'd been in there. So it was, a very possible situation. And God stepped in, took care of the situation. She got some friends of mine told her that they were going to, take care of her if she did that to me. Like they they had my back, I guess. Bunch of women who are now Christians today, but most of them weren't yet then. But anyway, God took care of it, and she ended up in SAG. But when she got to SAG, she had just a Bible, and for 6 months she was housed in segregation and with just a Bible, and God spoke to her, and she ended up getting saved. And when she got saved, she came back. They put her back in the dorm with me, and I was so scared because she wanted to talk to me. But when she came and talked to me, she asked me if I would do Bible study with her, and she said, I know nobody else will sit with me to do it because everybody's so mad, but would you be willing to teach me more about what the Bible says? And I told her as long as we sat directly under the camera, because I didn't trust her. But I did do Bible study with her. And today she's at a whole different unit. She is going to be in there the rest of her life. But she's at a whole different unit. And I'm getting letters from people whose life had been changed that are thanking me for my influence in that lady's life, because now she is leading them to the Lord. And that's so cool to see, because God just continues to do amazing things, even when I'm not there, and that, just keeps moving in that place. Questions? Because I have so many stories to tell. I could go on forever and not get anywhere.
Oh, Hannah, this is amazing. This is incredible. Tell us about the house now that you moved from Corpus to where the prison is, and you started this house for the Sisters in White, right? At Sendeo Ministries.
Yes. So we're not exactly where the prison is. We're about 2.5 hours away from the nearest women's prison, but God placed us exactly where we're at. We're kind of out in the middle of nowhere. We had this property donated to us, and it's perfect for what we're doing. But when I got out, I had all the support in the world. I had media supporting me. I had people offering for counseling. I had people with money that were wanting to give me money. I had a church family. I had a family that loved me. Everything that you could want from the outside to support me through the transition, right? But it was still very, very hard. I have PTSD, and as I explained before, I still get scared to death when the cop comes, walks by. I still have things that are really hard for me. And I had as I walked through that and saw that even with all that support, how hard it was, I thought about my friends that I had made inside prison, and how could they do it without support? How could they, people that have been in there for 20 years and don't even have any family to go home to, don't even have, anywhere to go or any friends, or, and if they go to a transitional home that's state run, it's just most of them are easy access for, drugs and, all kinds of things that are just a mess. And so as I began to pray about that, something God laid on my heart was just to open a home for people that are coming out, and specifically for people that have longer sentences and can't necessarily go everywhere else, because a lot of transitional homes are open for people that have under 5 years or have a drug charge, but are not open for people with longer sentences. And so we've opened this home, and we have a discipleship program. It's a 2-year program. So the first year of that program, it's pretty intense. It's 5 days a week, and then church on Sundays, and we do farmers market on Saturdays. So really 24 hours a day, they are doing something together with the group. And but we do everything from anger management to, parenting classes. We have a lot of classes that have to do with healing from trauma. And because all of these women have experienced extreme trauma. And and then the next year, if they complete that year and they want to stay, we help them to get a job, and they have classes 2 days a week, but the rest of the time they're working towards, saving, getting a car, getting a job, getting a license, all that stuff to get set up to be able to go out on their own. And, our atmosphere, the way we have it set up, we are being a family for them. So from the very beginning, when they come in, they are, everybody has these welcome home shirts, and they welcome them home and welcome them into part of the family. And they join my family for, Christmas, for Thanksgiving, for, Easter, all that stuff. We have a set apart time where we do family things, like Christmas morning, we will open our presents, just my family, because we did miss out on years of that and we need to do that. But then in the, by noon, everybody else, all these ladies are joined into our family, and they, we have Christmas with them, and because we're all part of the family of God, and they need a family that loves and cares about them. And you find that many people don't. So it's a pretty neat program. We're really excited about what God's doing with it. We are, right now, we only have 6 ladies. We are approved for 10, and we have a possibility of a new one coming, maybe even today. But we are having, what? A video? Oh, we also have people, sorry, Debbie's telling me to add this in. We have people that video in that are not part of the, that are not living at the house, but they come through Zoom and they join our classes through Zoom. One of our ladies, her dad's got cancer, and so she's at home taking care of him, but wants to be a part of the classes. And then, just different ladies. We have a base in Mexico because one of our ladies she was supposed to be coming to us, and she got deported at the very last minute, and God opened the doors for us to work with some missionaries there to help her get a house. And she joins through our video classes. So we've just really seen God do some amazing things in that. We are adding on to the house so that we can house up to 25 ladies. And we're pretty close we're about $20,000 short of finishing that. So when we get, we're only doing it as God provides the money. So, when we get the next $5,000, we do the next project, or build it. We got bathrooms and stuff that we're putting in. And then when we also we have a church at Calvary Chapel. I don't know if you guys know much about Calvary Chapels, but we have my husband's an ordained Calvary Chapel pastor. So we have a small home fellowship right now, but we are outgrowing that. So we are also in the process of looking towards building a building here pretty soon for our church. So.
Oh my gosh. Oh, go ahead, Hannah.
No, I was just saying, other questions?
Oh my gosh, you guys, are you like tongue-tied like I am? This is it's amazing to see what's happened, Hannah. It's amazing to see how God has used you in this horrific situation, and how it really is beauty from ashes. It touches me too, your heart for the women, seeing past their behavior and really that they are hurting. And it's not only lip service, but you have done so much to back that up. You've devoted your whole family is devoted, like your whole life, to helping these women integrate back and to set them up for success. And I'm so touched. I'm not surprised at all, but I'm so touched and so moved. So I could talk for a long time. I want to open it up to everybody else. Natalie, it looks like you unmuted. Did you have something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for coming to share your story with us. I love stories of faith where you see people overcome, and you are amazing. You had mentioned about writing notes and cards for some of these women. That's what I do. As I mentioned, have an organization where we do that, and it's really strange. And maybe I don't believe in accidents, because I literally just was talking to my boyfriend probably a week ago, and the idea has been on my heart for about a year or two, wondering how we could write letters to prison inmates. And I actually said the words out loud, and he was listening to me. And then now I'm sitting here face to face with you, and that's what you do.
Well,
so
cool.
If there's any way that we can connect and we can,
Yes, definitely. So we have multiple different options for that. So if you just maybe connect afterwards, we can set you up with some different ways that you can do it, and you can decide how you want to be involved. We have everything from, you can pick, a holiday and do 1,000 people for that holiday, to being a pen pal for one person once a month.
Fabulous. I love it. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Oh, I'm excited.
And who was not thinking of Natalie that she would be speaking up on this? Yeah, she's the queen of love notes. And I was also going to say too, I have bought the most beautiful cards from Sendeo Ministries, from some of the women who are incarcerated make these beautiful cards. And so I've given them, I mean, they're great, thank you cards to all the things that, we do to support Natalie in the love note writing. We could also get them from Syndeo Ministries too.
Yeah, so that's how we provide for the hygiene products that we send in. Right now, we send in hygiene products for 10,000 women. Our goal is to get it to all of the women in Texas, and then maybe beyond that. But at this point, we've gotten to a good majority of the units. It's a little over 10,000. But each package of cards provides for a woman to get a package of hygiene products. In Texas, they do not give deodorant or shampoo to women in prison. If you don't have money, then you don't get those things. And unfortunately, a lot of people that go to prison have burnt their bridges, so they don't have money. They don't have somebody to send them money, and Texas doesn't pay their inmates for work. You have to work, but you don't get paid. So there's no way for them to get money. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. And then Michelle.
Hi, Hannah. So I have my question's a little bit on the personal side, because this is my first time hearing your story and everything, and I'm so inspired by everything that you've overcome. Have you found a way to forgive the justice system who was involved?
Yes. So that was kind of interesting. The story, it's interesting because the one story I've told you so far, it kind of goes along with this. So when this woman that was wanting to hurt me, after my friend stepped in, she decided that she was going to hurt her girlfriend instead, because that way she wouldn't get in so much trouble. But then she got caught with the weapon and ended up in SEGS. But when everything happened and she was being taken out in handcuffs out of our dorm, I watched that even my friends that were Christians were all excited about the drama of this situation. And I remember being just so overwhelmed by that. Like, how is this exciting? How can people be like all hyped up about this? It's really sad. And I went to God and I was asking God about that. And I was like, I don't want to become like these people. I don't want to be so bitter and so hurt that things like this are exciting. Yeah. And I asked God, like, how do I not become like these people? And I remember God very gently saying to me, this is the first step. I want you to write a letter to this woman telling her that you forgive her. And it was interesting because it was my second chair prosecutor. And I didn't really know too much about her. She had been involved in my case, but just in a few areas. But she had to give closing statements. I found out later she didn't write the closing statements. She just had to read them. But she had given closing statements, and they were, pretty horrible, said a lot of horrible things against me. And but in general, I hadn't had near as much interaction with her, or didn't have near as much to forgive her for as other people. So I thought it was interesting, God, why her? But I said, okay, I'm going to try to write this letter. And I sat down, I tried to write this letter. And I started out with saying, you meant this for evil, but God meant this for good. And I was sharing some of the things that God, was doing inside the prison. And then as I was writing it, I remember, getting upset and tearing it up and then starting over again and writing again. And then I was like, and this time, instead of writing, you meant this for evil, I wrote, like, I don't know what your heart was on this, but I know that, that this was meant for evil, but God meant it for good. Meaning, like, the enemy had meant this for evil, but I don't know where your heart was. And long story short, I fought with God for weeks about this, tore it up a few times, put it in the back of my box, all the stuff. Well, while I was fighting with God, this woman was being moved from her position as assistant district attorney to the district attorney. And the district attorney got in trouble for something, got moved into a different position, and she got put in there by the governor, appointed just for like an interim position. And so then when I found out this happened, like it gave me this freedom where I felt like I could send this letter and she probably would never get it. And it's kind of sad, but that's the truth, So I was like, okay, God, I can do this. I'll be obedient. I'll send this letter. She's probably never going to get it anyway, right? Because I thought they're never going to give the district attorney a letter from a convicted felon. And the letter got to the county clerk, who had been following my case and believed I was innocent, and took it and handed it to the new district attorney. And then the next morning she showed up at my pastor's office in tears, and she ended up getting saved. And she now runs a Bible study in the courthouse. And God used that to open a door that while she was the district attorney, she called my attorney, called Cynthia Orr, who Sarah mentioned, and she asked her to come and look at the case. And she told her, she said, I know there's things wrong with this case. I was there. I saw things that were done that were illegal. I saw things that were done that were wrong, but I don't know how to present that or how to find it, and come over here and look. And she gave her like free access to all the notes and everything, which is what opened the door for her to actually be able to find the evidence that had been hidden in my case. So what she found some work product that was an email back and forth talking about how they had found this evidence that proved my innocence, and what were they going to do with it, and how could they hide it, and then then she was able to find that it had all been hidden, and how to take care of that. So God used that and that situation to show me like that I needed to trust him in in forgiving the different people. And as I've walked through that with each person, like people ask me, am I still angry with the district attorney that was first chair in the case? And I'm not angry with her. I'm very sad because her life has gone downhill since my case. Like she thought she was going to make a name for herself out of my case. And now she's like barely has a job, and she's a single mom, and she's on a bunch of psych meds. There's just a bunch of things that, like she got herself in that situation that is so sad. And now like I have the opportunity, my attorneys have, wanted to try to prosecute her for what she's done and try to make a name out of it because of all the media that's gone along with my case. But I feel like it would just be harmful to her, and I feel sad for her. So, with each person, I've had to walk through it differently, but that one story was the beginning of that. And it helped me to really be able to have trust that God had a good plan that involved me forgiving people.
I think,
and not forgiving just holds, it doesn't do anything for the other person. Like, it's not like it hurts them. It just like puts more pain inside of your life. So.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I feel like a lot of times when we come out of traumatic or extreme events, forgiveness is one of the hardest steps. I know personally it has been one of the hardest steps for me. So I appreciate you sharing that.
No problem.
Yeah. Hannah, it's beautiful that you can be on here, because it is interesting how many first responders and veterans are suffering in silence so greatly. The suicide rate is so high. And so for you to share your story on this side, this angle is, again, to me, it's amazing. It's just how God works. It's bringing all the willing, open hearts that are wanting to heal and to have hope. And so it's really wonderful to hear you share. Yeah, Diana.
Yeah, hi. Thank you. I just want to thank you so much for sharing your story. And it's just so inspiring to see how God moves in circumstances like that. Like we could easily feel like the victim in that kind of situation, but I just love how you turn your story into a victory story. And my question is, what was everyday life like for you? I mean, from my understanding, you were there for 7 years.
Yes.
And that's a really long time in that kind of confined environment. And so I just wanted to ask you, like, what was your everyday life like? And were there times where you felt like it wasn't going to end? Were you always hopeful that you would come out of there? Or was there kind of like a breaking point where you just felt like, well, this is it, and I'm not going to get out of here? I mean, could you share your thoughts and your feelings about that?
So let's see, everyday life. So I lived in a dorm with 102 women. The first 5.5 months I was in solitary confinement because of all the media around my case. So for 5.5 months, I was completely by myself, 24/7, was taken out to take a shower in the middle of the night. And that was it. And
was that difficult for you?
Yes, it was very difficult. I still to this day have a hard time being left alone in a room because it really messed with my head. It was very difficult for me. And the girl that was next to me, I could hear her talking for a good majority of the time. I did have someone else that moved in, but for a good majority of that 5.5 months, I had someone next to me that I don't say this lightly, but I think she was demon possessed. Like she was,
oh my God.
She would speak in all these other weird languages and voices and scream and yell. And she was always, every time that would happen, she would hurt herself. And she would, they'd have to take her out covered in blood. And it was just really crazy. But anyway, then after that, I was put in a dorm with 102 women, and I was in, there was just 102 beds lined out. And then in the front of the dorm, there was a little day room area. I worked in the laundry, which meant I went to work at 3:00 in the morning every day for 5 of those years. And did everybody's laundry. But I also did, I got moved to a stock clerk position for pretty quickly. And so I did a lot of the books for the laundry. That was a God thing because most people's jobs in Texas when they first get to prison is working what they call the host squad. It's like they take an Aggie and you cut the grass with an Aggie. And then when the grass grows back again, you cut it again. And in between, while you're waiting for the grass to grow back, you move rocks from like one part of the field to the other. So that was my job when I first got there, but God moved miracles. Within 3 weeks, I was put in a job that was one of the best jobs on the unit. And so in the evenings, I would do Bible studies with the ladies or after I got out of work. As far as did I always have hope? I always had hope that God was God and God was in control. I did always have hope that God would at some point prove my innocence. Because he had done some pretty specific things to share that with me. Those are long stories that I don't know how much time we have for, but God had given me promises that I held on to, and he reminded me of those promises every time I would begin to lose hope. And but as far as like how long that would take, that was something that definitely I would lose hope in, and I felt like it was forever, even though 7 years is actually a really short amount of time. If you're falsely convicted, it usually takes 20 to 25 years to prove your innocence in America. So when I go to Innocence Network conferences and stuff like that, I'm the baby because God did miracles and it was only 7 years. But 7 years seems like forever when you've got 5 kids at home that are growing up without you. So it was definitely hard and long, but God carried me through every step of the way.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your heart. It's just such an honor to hear things on a more personal level. I mean, I think sharing about the Bible study is amazing, and it's so wonderful to see what God can bring out of a situation like that. But just to hear about you personally and how where you were at mentally and emotionally and spiritually. It kind of gives a deeper insight into what it's like to be incarcerated, you know, and wondering like how, I mean, like you said, you had hope, you had the Lord, you had your faith, but just having an idea of what it might be like for people who don't have that, you know, it seems to me like it could be real tough to just get through the day.
People committed suicide on the unit where I was at. People committed suicide. There was at least one suicide a week when I was there.
And it's worse now.
And it's worse now since COVID and everything.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Wow. That's intense. Thank you. Papa Ron.
Yeah, a very intriguing story. Knowing how you can get railroaded into something and they're just digging and prying. When Michelle asked you about forgiveness, you seem to go to an action rather than an emotion, which was you chose to not reward evil for good. You mentioned that on 3 different kind of scenarios in your explanation. Where did that come from?
I think I was raised knowing that that forgiveness is not a feeling. You know, my mom was a Christian growing up, and my mom used to tell me this is a choice that you have to make. You may not feel like forgiving this person today, but you need to choose to walk in obedience and forgive that person. So I think that was something I was taught, something I was raised believing, but also it's something that God reiterated to me even in those places where I was having to forgive really hard things, and reminded me, you know, you are making a choice to obey me and to let me heal this part of your life. And what happens with them is different. And one of the things that I didn't say, that I said in the letter, but I didn't share with you guys, is I told this prosecutor, I told her, I said, I'm putting your case in a higher court. I said, I'm giving the decision having to do with you and what happens to you to God, because he knows your heart. And so I'm not in charge of your case anymore. And I'm giving that away. I'm putting it in a higher court. And so like before that, I felt like, you know, that was something that God was telling me, you know, was that I was trying to hold on to those things and keep them in my court. Like I was going to be judge, jury, and prosecutor, you know, and that's not my job. My job is to love, and that's his job. He's the only one that's capable of doing it, because he's the only one that knows the whole story.
Well, I appreciate that. And then just, I guess, a little. So there's a saying that mood follows action. So you took the appropriate action. Did that change your, I guess, you in terms of not being bitter about it? I kind of don't even know how to I don't know how to ask that in a way that's not telling you what I want to hear. It's like, so you did the action, and did other things follow, like emotion and
definitely. Like, I mean, with that person in specifically that I told that story about, like today we're friends on Facebook, and we like, you know, we talk to each other regularly. She sent, you know, when I had baby, she sent gifts for the baby, you know, like, I mean, we have become friends, and I don't think that could have ever happened without, you know, me. First, I had to make that decision to obey and forgive. And then God, you know, helped with the emotion to follow.
I think that's so important. And I don't know how you tell people that in other arenas, is that if we start trying to conquer the emotion, that's a even harder battle, because it's in our head and heart, where the obedience part seems to lead. It's a longer journey, but it seems to be a better destination.
Yes. And obedience opens the door for God to change our hearts so that we can feel different about the situation.
That's a great way of putting it. Yeah. Gosh, I love that. Paul.
I'm happy to let Baya go first if she wants to.
Baya, do you have to leave right at the hour? Do you want to go?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Paul, thank
So
you.
first, I really want to thank you. I mean, I rarely have a story that really moved my heart so deeply, because we all have the word. We we believe in God. We have, but there's some situation when you see someone going through the cross. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like it bring it really it bring it to reality, the fact that your love for God has sustained you, and the fact that you carry that cross. I mean, some cross is pretty heavy, but when I see your smile right now, when I see your faith, how you've been clean from everything, first I want to praise God. For what he did with everything in your life and how he touched people. And I think about that place where he said, this kernel, when it dies, it can bring a lot of fruits. And I think you really went through that. You really went through so many death of things in you that God really brought so much life.
Yeah.
It's so encouraging. It's so encouraging. It's sad, okay, it's sad, but I don't live with sadness. I live with faith and hope.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Don't live with sadness, because God is so much bigger.
So it's just mind-boggling to me to see the obedience, the word in action, and what God can do in your life that is really submitted like that. And so you're my hero.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
After Jesus, of course.
Yes, definitely.
If I could just add on, I had to go through my own process too, Hannah, because I was so angry on your behalf. I was all going to come up. So it's amazing to see this and to hear your stories, because I was beside myself than what happened to you. So it is another beautiful story of what God has done through a willing, open-hearted person. So
I confirm that, because Sarah was beside herself and she talked about you all the time on our home church. So I really vouch for that.
Yeah, that really touched me, because I was a mom of 4 small kids too, so I was imagining everything. Well, Paul, I don't want to put you off. You've been so patient. Thank you.
Listen, I'm not in a hurry. I'm retired, remember? There are a couple of things that come to mind, Hannah, in listening to you talk. First, I now understand, where I didn't understand before, your anxiety about law enforcement people. And what I'm about to say is not going to change that one iota, but I just want you to know you're in good company here. The first thing that comes to mind is that forgiveness is a gift second only to salvation. And by forgiving people, it doesn't necessarily mean that you forget what happened. It means that you internalize forgiveness toward them. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, you relieve yourself of some of the anxiety that shows up in an encounter with some of those people. But exactly the opposite has happened here. And that is that your willingness to be forgiving and your willingness to communicate that forgiveness has had a ripple effect from which there is no logical end. And you talk about having 1,200 people. That didn't happen because you were busy being mean to people. Okay. It happened because you were willing to forgive somebody who had vowed to do you harm. And that's not an easy thing to do. I've had to do it myself as a police officer. Just very briefly, I walked in on an armed robbery one time and a guy pointed his .45 automatic at my head while I was off duty in plain clothes driving my own car. And he looked at me and he said, "You must be a cop," and then went to discharge his weapon. Mm. And I took a defensive move and relieved him of his gun as he pulled the trigger. And I have scar tissue on the sides of my face from the shrapnel that entered, but was so hot that it cauterized the wound. So there was no bleeding. I thought it was just a sting from something bouncing off the side of my head. But that man is in prison for the rest of his life for attempting to kill a police officer. And it took me a long time, but I forgave him for that. And I forgave the other 11 people that were robbing this place all simultaneously. They were part of a Hispanic gang from East Los Angeles. And candidly, that was a hard thing for me to do. I watched my daughters grow up from infants to teenagers in a movie that flashed before me that I had never seen before. And I realized that had I been armed at that time, I would have instinctively reached for my gun and I would have been dead. And so I finally came to the point where I forgave him. I wrote to the president of the parole board a copy of the letter that I sent to him in prison, telling him that. And the president of the parole board sent me a letter saying, "Well, this is not going to change anything." To which I responded, "Yes, it is. It's going to change things for me." Mm-hmm. And he and I didn't get along terribly well. His response I consider to be grossly inappropriate. And so I just let it go. But I wanted to share this only to tell you that for me, it was eventually a huge relief for me to just simply let go of that and stop living in fear that these guys are coming after me because they'd made threats and done all the rest of the things. And now I live in a fairly secure area in that it's really hard to find unless you know right where it is. Mm-hmm. Some of you here can testify to that. But the point is that I have surrendered all of that, and it's literally no longer a factor.
That's awesome.
The other thing I might share with you is that you and Natalie probably should get together sometime soon. I think that she has a heart for what you're trying to do, and you may have the means to help her accomplish that.
Yeah, definitely.
And I can tell you firsthand what a true sweetheart she is.
Yes.
Awesome.
And I've read a good part of her book. I'm not finished with it yet. And so I know some of the struggles she's been through, and I'm not going to recite them here. That's her story to tell when she feels like it. But I would really strongly urge that the two of you at least communicate and determine if there was something that you can do together, because she writes some incredibly precious notes.
I look forward to it.
Thank you, Paul. You're so sweet.
I'm sorry?
She said you were very sweet.
You are very sweet. Thank you.
Oh, well, you are too. And I have tremendous respect for Chris as well. I've read his book, yeah, but I have yours with an autograph, see? He couldn't autograph my Kindle, so he's out of luck. Anyway, thank you.
Papa Ron, did you want to close us out here?
Yeah, so I didn't hear how your children recovered from any of that. And have they, or has your role model helped them get there? Or just a minute on that. And maybe this turns up too much stuff. I don't know.
No, it's okay. So we, as a family, I think everyone in our family has a PTSD, and so it obviously, affected all of us. But that doesn't mean that God didn't carry us through it, and that God didn't surround us and protect us. And, God provided a church family that was so amazing, that took care of my children. While I was gone, 7 whole years while I was gone, I had homeschool moms that took my kids and homeschooled them for me. Different moms signed up for semesters or years and homeschooled my kids so that they wouldn't have to be in a public school hearing bad things about their mom when something came out on the media or whatever. I had, family a church family that, raised money to help get my kids to come see me. Sarah mentioned my husband came to see me every week. Our church paid for gas for that. And we had people that helped to babysit so that my husband could go to work. We had a lady that we didn't even know from some other church that brought over meals every Wednesday night so that my husband could continue to do youth ministry and not have to worry about feeding the kids before going to church. So, my husband, because we were working in youth ministry before all this happened, and he continued to do youth ministry the whole time I was gone. But God provided in ways that are so amazing that I could never tell all the stories here, but those are just a few of them. And, when I first got out, I remember, one of the stories that God had pointed out to me was the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Whenever I was waiting to go to trial, I had this dream of this story, and I was telling the king, even if I'm still going to praise God, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were. And then the very next day, my 3-year-old comes home from church with this, these finger puppets he'd made from it, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And so I felt like God had given me this promise, right? But then whenever I held on to that promise all the way through. And I remember thinking, the story says that they came out and they didn't even smell like smoke, so in my mind, I thought that when this was all over, everything was going to be perfect. Right. We weren't even going to smell like smoke. We were going to, everything was going to be happily ever after, and, trips to Disney World and, all that stuff. But life is not like that. Right. And the reality is that we do have things. And so whenever I got out and I had PTSD, I remember I was really upset, and I was upset with God. I was like, why can't I sleep without having nightmares? Or why do I, jump when somebody comes up behind me? Or, all these different things that I struggled with. And I was even more angry that my kids had things, my daughter, she's 20, and she got pulled over by a cop the other day. And she was, 2 hours later, we had to go get someone to drive and pick her up because she still wasn't well enough to get home because she was so affected by getting pulled over because she had a tail light out. It was something really minor, really silly, but she had this major panic attack about it. But anyway, long story short, God said to me, well, I had been talking to my counselor about different things, but I had never shared this situation with her. Right. I had never told her that I was upset that I had PTSD. I had just been talking to God about it. And I was like, why do I still smell like smoke? And that's why I kept telling God, it's not fair. This is the scripture or one of the scriptures that you gave me, but I smell like smoke. So my counselor says to me, she said, can I step out of counselor mode for a minute and just tell you that I feel like God has something he wants me to share with you? I was like, yeah, sure. And she said, are you okay with this? Because I feel like it's a word from the Lord. And I said, yes, say whatever you want to say. And she says to me, she said, Hannah, you may think that you smell like smoke, but Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the Bible doesn't ever say that they liked roasting marshmallows. It doesn't ever say that they, didn't have nightmares. It doesn't ever say that they weren't scared of, fire. It doesn't say any of those things. It doesn't say that they didn't have PTSD. When it says that they smelled like smoke or that they didn't smell like smoke, the very next thing and what they're talking about is the fact that they smelled like the aroma of Christ. And them not smelling like smoke is what changed the whole nation, because the king said, we all need to bow down to the God of the Israelites. And so then my counselor said, you're holding on to this like your PTSD is because God, has something out against you or something. But the reality is that you smell like the aroma of Christ. And the reason that he's allowed you to have some of these things in your life is so that you can better understand the people that he's called you to minister to and better smell like the aroma of Christ to them as you walk through these things with them. Yeah. And as we've have these ladies here and we watch them have a panic attack over getting shampoo, and I know how to deal with it, and even my kids know how to deal with it, we see that come to pass. Like God is using that to prepare us for ministry.
So it turned into a sweet smelling savor.
Yeah.
So, and appreciate that you gave kind of a vision of that. I mean, because I'm going to ask you this and two things. You have Debbie Brinker on there. What's that about? Anyway,
Debbie, she's right here. She's my my operations manager.
Oh,
so
hi, Debbie. Okay.
She's just outside of the camera. She keeps me organized.
All right, but anyways, thanks, Debbie. Because I'm distracted. I easily distracted. So. Could you have gotten here without going through there?
Well, no, I wouldn't be where, I don't think I would have even realized like the ministry that God's called me to and the places where, the things that God is doing in our lives today wouldn't have even, there's no way I would have got them.
Yeah, those three witnesses couldn't have gotten to the other side of the fire without going through the fire.
Right.
It's like, but you've given real word pictures that I think help others vicariously experience your experience without having to experience it. And so anyways, that's enough of that about that.
All right.
Yeah. Oh man, Hannah, this is just so inspiring. I think that is such a good point that you just said, because I think if we're not aware of what's happening, shame can be right there powerfully when we feel like we still smell like smoke. When God is presenting an aroma of Christ and we think we smell like smoke, it's like another way that the evil one can just mess with us. When, God has pulled us out of so much, he can mess with our head that way with the shame. Like I'm not on full cylinders. I'm not quite back. Don't have quite the confidence that I used to have, and just mess with us with this shame, when in reality, it's the aroma of Christ that's coming across. And
yeah, it's just trying to still keep us down even after we've come through, you know.
Definitely.
Right. Anything didn't win the first time, so let me see if I can mess with her head. And yeah, I just Hannah, I just love you. I just
Hey,
love
Hannah, is it Hannah with an H or no H? Or
With an H.
with an H, okay, because it's important. That H is important. That completes the name. Okay.
Yes.
Hannah, period. Well, listen, does anybody have any last comments before we say goodbye? I know that, you know, Natalie, I can get you connected, Hannah, with anybody on here. You know, Daniel, if you want any connections, well, we can do all that offline. Yeah. Anybody else want to say a last minute comment here before I?
Yeah, I have one quick comment.
Okay.
A week or so ago, Chris and Natalie and Goodell and Mary Lou and I met to have dinner together in Encinitas, and it was a wonderful time. And there's value to it, just as when Michelle and Sarah were here, or the times that Michelle and or Sarah and Scott and I have gone to have coffee, or even just Sarah and Goodell and myself. And so my plea is to you, Daniel, that you get over here when you can and bring Lona with you, please. Because I would love to sit down and spend some time with both of you.
And his lovely wife, right? We never knew his wife's name because he always used to say my lovely wife. So I was just reminding you that we want his lovely wife to come too. Yeah.
No,
absolutely.
Please bring your wife with you if she can come.
Yeah, my lovely wife, Melissa. Absolutely.
Well.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And we've talked about it. She wants to go. We just got to figure it out.
We have a great talk place.
We have a guest room. We have a guest room upstairs. We need a place to stay.
Oh.
So.
Well, listen.
It's all about connection and community.
It's, you know, Hannah, this has been something that I think because of my passion for preventing suicide, it started out with a conversation, somebody sharing their story with me, who was a Green Beret, retired Green Beret. And so that changed my whole focus to this arena. And that's why I ended up here, something that I never, ever thought I would be part of. I just never was on my radar. But then after I lost my dad, it was about the community that was that had a high suicide rate. So it's kind of funny how God brought me here too. And so many of the things that you're sharing, I can relate to how crazy it is that, you know, God's plan can be so different from ours. And I want to thank you so much for taking your time. First of all, to being such an incredibly faithful woman and being such an inspiration to all of us. I mean, and you covered so many different areas that we can look to for inspiration in how God works when you have faith, you know, that you're connected. But what do you want us to walk away with before we say goodbye?
Oh, I don't know. Just that God is good.
That's
and his plan, like, hey, we might not always understand his plans, but we can always trust his heart.
Yeah. Can't always understand his plans, but we can trust his heart. Yeah.
We don't always understand his timing either.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Very true. Well, listen, I'm just going to stop the recording now. Thank you, Hannah.